Hello and welcome back to the She Gallery Show. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us, nerd.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching. You are live with us today at Can TV. Thank you, Can TV, for providing this platform. And you are free to join the conversation throughout the segment at 312-738-1060. That phone number is also found on the bottom of the screen and will be throughout the segment. Please remember that you can also visit us on our website, that's sharinghisenergygallery.net, and you can watch all of our previous segments from 2017 through the present, and you can contact all of our past guests as well. So today we have a very special segment. We've been talking about cultivating graffiti roots, graffroots, and the paveway movement that it's formed into, to the evolution that Trickster had led us through earlier this year. So Nerd here has been with X-Men Crew since 1997 with true graffroots, with growing up here in Wilson and Broadway. You were already just born into this movement, is that right?
Basically, like a neighborhood that was just, torn up with graffiti and some graffiti legends that I looked up to. And then I had older brothers that did graffiti. So it was just natural to be a graffiti artist, coming from my neighborhood.
And that's what it was growing up here in Chicago. But you were actually born in West Virginia, and you're
Yes.
like one day old, and you come here back to Chicago. And since you've been involved with graffiti, and not only was it part of your family, it was also part of your community. And one thing that you mentioned that I thought was really cool that maybe everybody should continue to follow is that you said that within your community, your alderman was like your family. So you formed or you were involved with community engagement since very early on. You want to talk to us a little bit more about that? How your alderman was part of your family, your community?
Well, basically, she was really family, which was Alderman Helen Schiller in Uptown in the 46th Ward. And she had a son named Brendan, which was a great friend of mine and still is a great friend of mine today. But the core group that I grew up with, playing sports, playing fast pitch on the wall, and playing football with every day, all of us was really a tight community. And we all, as we grew up to be teenagers, we worked like summer youth programs, Mayor Daley's youth programs, and we learned how those went. And then we started teaching those programs and developing our own programs. One of them was called Youth on Youth, which is still in operation today. And it's basically just giving these kids a chance from our own neighborhood to play sports and, to be active and get into other things other than just, working or just hanging out on the street. That's how it started off.
That's awesome. And when we're talking about building this community, we're talking about you as a youth, engaging with other youths that were only about 2 years younger than you, right? You were mentoring these kids. What was that like?
Well, it was more like family. Like you didn't really look at it like, hey, I'm teaching these kids. It was just that was natural to teach them. And also there was teachers of mine that was maybe only 1 or 2 years older than me. So that's where the concept whole youth on youth is kids teaching kids. And some of these kids don't want to learn from adults. They don't want to hear the da 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 da, doing this, doing that. They want to hear from, some of the older kids that are into the things they're into, which I was into graffiti art. So a lot of kids respected me and wanted to hear from what I had to say.
Mm-hmm. And something really cool about what these programs offered, aside from this bond that was created between the youth and the youth, is opportunities for employment, right? You got paid for doing this.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sure, was inspiring as well for others to continue to on. So you were a great influence, and you were also influenced. Today we're also going to talk a little bit more about your engagement, more about your community engagement and its achievements, your work with nonprofits, how your health, you've had some health issues that you've had to overcome, how it's impacted you. And we'll take a look at some of your art as well. Now, you are self-taught, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and your graffiti name is Nerd, and that has been your graffiti name since the 90s, is that right? How did that come
Since
about?
1987,
Oh, since the 80s, look at that.
And, I mean, when you think about the word nerd, you might think how this guy got his name. At 6th and 7th grade, I transferred kind of a little bit out of Uptown into the edges of Uptown to a school called Greeley, which was, a little different for me. It was a different types of students and different, in a sense, And then we had different kind of gangbangers that, you know, I wasn't too used to. And they used to treat me, and they used to call me nerd, and they used to bully me. Oh, this kid's a nerd, you know. I come to school, you know, kind of try to dress up and, you know, look good, and I nerd this, nerd that, till it got down to the point where I stood up and fought back, and I punched this kid. And when I punched him, he like flipped out of his desk and fell back, and I ended up getting in trouble and getting suspended. So then when I got back to school, a bunch of people would just whisper like, "Psst, psst, that's that kid they call nerd, and that's that nerd this, nerd that," and then this nerd just stuck to me. I was already doing graffiti at the time from the early 80s, which I used to write Wave before that because my nickname was New Wave. But then nerd just stuck so hard, and I looked at it like a name. Who would want to be called nerd? They never figured out that's me. You know, like it was a name that you would think you would hide from the police from. You know, basically you didn't want nobody to know who you was back then in graffiti.
That's so funny. So you were sort of bullied for being different, and you stood up and you took that and you kind of turned it into a joke, and like now it's become you and a part of you.
Yeah.
And good for you for teaching back. I mean, for fighting back. And aside from being self-taught, I mean, you were self-taught, but yet you got to the point where you became a teacher as well. Aside from the mentorship programs that you were involved with as a youth, you became a teacher, and you also taught teachers how to teach. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of teachers, a lot of kids I grew up with, you know, we were all kids together. They grew up to be teachers, and they wanted to bring in graffiti into their classrooms. So I taught them a little bit on how to do this and how to come up with curriculum to teach graffiti art. And you know, one of my biggest passions was always to make graffiti, you know, be recognized as a true art form. And I figured if I start now, maybe 30, 40 years down the line, you know, it would actually get recognized as a true art form. And then look at it today, you know, it's doing real good, and a lot of graffiti artists are actually making a living and, you know, and respected in the art field.
Thank you so much for that, for giving back to the community. Earlier not this season, but earlier through our seasons, we also had introduced Kane One, who teaches it at the Art Institute, creating this curriculum and forming these, forcing society to kind of respect this art form that perhaps it wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
By educating the public about where it comes from and the unity that it really truly brings, the elements of the hip hop, and talking about the elements of the hip hop. You do graffiti, but you have another true passion that helps you for yourself that you do, and that's the DJ. And you want to talk to us a little bit about your DJ background?
DJing, I always say, you know, I love DJing more than I love graffiti. But DJ is more, you know, you could rock a party and you got hundreds of people there and it's for everybody. But also DJing was something that I like to do by myself, where I like to just sit with the headphones on, and I like to blend music. I like to match beats, and then I also was into cutting and scratching and stuff like that. But it was just for me, for my own time. But with graffiti, it seemed to be something with a lot of people out in the open, people watching you, and you know, which I enjoy that too. And I enjoy that a bunch of graffiti artists that don't even know each other, just like this weekend, I met about maybe 10, 15 more guys, and we all came together. We had no plan, and we came up with a plan and did a mural. You know, that's an art form that most artists can't get together with 30 people and just make a mural without fighting and without running and hiding, you know?
That's beautiful. It's a unity. And you made a really interesting point comparing the canvas, smaller canvas, to the wall canvas. And kind of like the comparison of like when you are DJing, when you're making these beats, it's for yourself, such as when you're painting a canvas, it's more therapeutic for the one artist versus, you know, going out and working on street productions that are very spontaneous and organic, that bring this really great form of unity together. So we're going to move in a little bit and talk about your health, as much as you want to share, and the experiences that it's
Sure.
brought to you, and how you've overcome these obstacles.
Well, I have overcome some obstacles, but I'm still in the game. You know, I'm still in it, and I'm still fighting. And basically, I'm a diabetic and been going on a diabetic for something like 25 years. And, you know, you grow, the way I was growing up, you eating certain foods, And you know, it's hard to break those bad habits you got. Drinking soda, drinking pop, eating sugar, going to the candy store. Those are like favorite pastimes, things that kids enjoy doing. But as you learn that you're a diabetic and you can't eat sugar no more, so you got to change your whole lifestyle and your diet. And currently, I just came out of the hospital. I dealt with a diabetic ulcer on my toe, and I ended up getting my toe amputated, because I had blood poisoning and blood in my bone. And, that been a little struggle, but throughout my life, my older brother's a diabetic, and my mother was a diabetic, and my grandmother was a diabetic, which my grandmother passed away, and my mother passed away from complications of diabetes. But she also, lived a great life as a diabetic, and she ended up losing her leg, but I never seen her hold her back and hold her down from doing anything. And I took that as great inspiration, and it's sorry to say that I thought it might even happen to me one day, and here I am. I'm fighting it, and I'm trying to keep my foot and my toe, but as I get older and dealing with the diabetics, it's just deteriorating after the years.
We'll move on and talk a little bit more about that, but first let's take this caller. Caller, are you still here?
Good evening. I just want to make this comment about graffiti. There's some graffiti that maybe even enhance a building or even enhance a wall, but there's other graffiti that people be thinking about in terms of gangs and all that, in terms of their signs. I have been on certain airlines where people had to clean it up, and I have heard some comments people have made that said some of the stuff is so pretty and so nice they hate to remove it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So that's another compliment to the innovators.
Thanks, caller. I appreciate that. And if I could talk about that for a second.
Of course.
In reality, gang graffiti was big. It was everywhere growing up in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. But it's kind of rare right now. You don't see a lot of gang graffiti, but you still do see the tagging and the bombing. But there's a lot of artists out there, and especially in Chicago, there's artists that come from all over the world to come to paint in Chicago, because Chicago is such a great place for graffiti, and the people of Chicago are starting to really love graffiti. It really, it's now that their generation is getting older. They grew up in the 70s, 80s, Beat Street, and they seen it and grew up and always wondered about it. And now it's catching up, and they love it, and they're appreciating it. And I appreciate you, caller. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. So speaking of graffiti and working on these murals, how has these health issues impacted your work between your big mural productions and your smaller canvas productions?
Well, the diabetes have caught up with my eyesight, which is, might sound terrible as an artist. Oh my God, his eyes.
Yes.
And currently right now, my left eye, I have no vision in it, but I have cataracts and I have borderline glaucoma. So some weeks I go with no vision in my left at all, and sometimes I get procedures that help me out to bring back some of my vision in my left. But it hasn't really affected too much of my art as far as going the massive big size murals. But when it comes down to the smaller size canvases, it's been affecting me a lot. And also, there's certain things I like to do to see better, as like say if I'm doing a portrait, I need my vision to see better at that. So if it's a time where I'm not seeing that good, the portraits ain't totally coming out the way I want them. But so I get more into working cartoonish or more fantasy art and more of my original art. So nobody could say, hey, that don't look like, that don't look like Scooby-Doo. No, that's my version of Scooby-Doo,
That version. So it allows you to practice your imagination, which you've already done.
Exactly.
Since earlier on anyway. And we look forward to taking a look at some of your artwork. Very special and unique artwork. But first, let's move on and talk a little bit about your achievements. Aside from your first achievement when speaking with you of becoming a family man and being a father, that is awesome. You've had other achievements within your art career. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about those?
One of my greatest achievements was having my work inside the Museum of Science and Industry and being at an exhibit there that lasted, somewhere about 3 months. And throughout the time, over 80,000 people had seen the exhibit. And I got to paint the whole outside the exhibit, which said hip hop, which, just means everything to me. And I also did a big painting on the inside where I covered the elements of hip hop, where I had a DJ, an MC, a person spray painting, a break dancer. So, but beyond all that, just having my art was, yeah, great. But also, I got to hang out at the museum and meet students that came in like school trips. Kids came busloads by the busload, and I got to talk about graffiti, and I got to get up there and do some hip hop karaoke on stage, and got some of the kids into doing the karaoke. And then that was 2002, so kids still, well, they're not kids no more, but some young adults come up to me and say, "Hey, I seen your stuff in the museum when I was a kid. I seen you talk. I do graffiti now. I'm an artist now. I design clothing. I do this. I got a scholarship for art." When I hear those kind of things, that's what I truly really love and really enjoy to hear.
Yeah, you know that you've really influenced somebody and continue with this power of great influence. That you know that you can really truly make a living out of anything that you really set your mind to. And in this case, it's an art form that was looked down upon. So it was quite a challenge. And because of people like you and other artists that have continued this movement regardless of that, it's become what it has become. And you've had you've also worked with starting clubs, such as being an art director for Kuma's Links. You want to talk to us a little bit about
Yeah, Kumba Links. Yeah, basically 3 young women that started a non-for-profit, and they're still going on today, 20 plus years, and they're all family to me. And they're big on poetry and spoken word. They do music there. They do rapping. They do a lot of dance. They do a lot of yoga. And then also I got to teach graffiti art through the program. So, we would have summertime programs where we would do art and the kids would paint canvases, and we would do an outside mural or two. And then at the end, have a cultivating event with all our dancers and combine with their shows and their backdrops and their programs. And then we'd have an art gallery show at the end of the summer, and so on, and performances and so on.
That is really, really cool. And one of the things that was really cool when we were speaking about this was highlighting a way of being around each other and the respect to women and these circles, these gatherings where you highlighted peace, unity, and respect.
We circle up, before, the program super big on respect and super big on honoring women and respecting women, because it's brought to you by 3 women. But we would circle up all the youth, and all the youth and the instructors, the adults, and before we start anything, the day off, the show off, the program, anything before we start, we get around, we all scream out peace, love, respect, unity. And then, it just gave us power. And when we turned around and we say, "I appreciate you," and we went down the line and told them why we appreciate you. And it just, it brought the kids together, and it also brought the instructors together with the kids. And it was really family orientated and really roots, really down roots.
That's that fifth element of unity. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
One thing that I really wanted to highlight before we move into looking at some of your art is your respect to women, and how using the word such as B, the B word, was like completely like off limits. We talked about influences by these elements, and I just want to bring up, there's a rapper by the name of Too Short that was around very early on.
Sure.
That did demean the woman a lot, but he had great beats. So it was, I believe that was like part of these influences that we've come across with these rappers and this music that continues on to influence today. And then we had rappers later on like Lupe Fiasco that references these type of lyrics that says, I really liked what Too Short's beats were doing, but I wasn't such a fan of the words, but I couldn't help but say it because they went with the beat, and before you know it, it becomes a part of you, and it becomes easier to say. So we really empower those hip-hop artists that continue to respect the woman and humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
Really,
I think Too Short turned that word into a musical note.
Yes.
Like, that's more of a, you know what I'm saying? That's more of a, that more than what the word really meant, you know?
So I know we only have a few minutes left. I just want to look at, he mentioned some of the achievements. You talked to us about some of your personal achievements, but you've also been featured in CBS and with Street Art New York City. And here we want to take a look at some of your most recent art that you've done here, and some of your glowing art. I want to call it glowing art, so we can have a really good idea of this imagination art.
You
You
call
want
it
to talk
that.
to us? Yeah,
That's what
fantasy art.
everybody's calling it, glow art. Basically, my whole career, I always wanted to have my stuff pop out more and glow. And nowadays, the paint is made so good for, like, they're really made for graffiti artists to do what they always wanted to do with it. And now I can make that paint glow. And it just comes off popping, and I get a reaction from the streets, from the graffiti artists, and I get a reaction from the common people that they can, like, oh, I really like that, It's something that draws them towards it. I'm not trying to make them crash their car or nothing, but, sometimes they're slowing down in their cars to see it.
That's really beautiful, and it's really, really vibrant. Before we move on to, I want to show a clip of a video that I had found online. So I'm just going to
Sure.
pull that up. And in the meantime, can you please talk to us a little bit more about what you're doing now, what you plan to do in the future, and some words of advice?
Okay. Now I got a couple shops I'm working with, and we're promoting some art shows, and we're gonna try to help some artists come up. Some of these young up and coming artists that need a place to show their work, and help them get into, like, you can make prints of your art. You don't just need paintings. You can make buttons. You can make pins. You could draw on a spray can and sell it. There's other means of making art. There's also the fashion field. We like to showcase some of these Chicago people are coming out with the craziest, coolest fashion that everybody wants, and they're not being seen. We want to help those guys, come to the shop and be able to start an outlet where they can sell a couple things. Then also I'm traveling a lot and meeting new people in different states, and just painting and just trying to keep the community alive of graffiti, and just, like, also teaching the awareness of graffiti, like, it's not always bad, it's not always frowned upon and looked on. And now they're all across the U.S. and different states, they're having these events, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're bringing in everything. They're bringing in all the culture, they're bringing in food, and they're bringing in clothing, and they're bringing in music, and people are coming out, and people are off their phones. It's a great environment to be in.
People off their phones.
Yeah.
And just please remember that in graffiti, that's a lot, the design, the sign within the letters, that's big. So you mentioned the sign, fashion design, and so on. So that's all part of that element. Now we are going to go ahead and take a look at this clip here.
Yeah, I haven't even watched this in a few. Good to see you again.
Why should you sleep so slow?
Yeah, I chose this song because it's just, I don't know, I just wanted to put, like, basically I do this for the love. I do
Looking
it
like
for
a
the love.
limb torn off. We're all together, just taking apart.
And to live forever.
We're willing through an endless fall. We are the ever
Really beautiful. Thank you again so much for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Chicago.
Peace.